gentlemen, my friends who are here, who have taken their time off. I'm extremely grateful to both the organizations, including this beautiful college campus, to give me this opportunity to talk to you. And it is on a subject which belongs to a country which I am sure is still in your heart, from which you may have migrated very recently, and which is there in your mind now and for times to come. And as I live on the other end of the world, the same is true for me, because I have been visiting here for the last 45 years as a student in America in the 60s, the counterculture days, and then as a frequent academic coming and lecturing and teaching, etc. So it's almost a lifetime of thinking about certain things. The only problem is that one is not very sure, even after a lifetime, what to say and what not to say. Because things are so complicated and they change so often. They change every 4 years or 5 years, and their whole perspective changes. Now the subject, you forgive me today, I happen to leave my glasses at home. Doesn't happen usually, but it happened today. Maybe there's a message in it. The subject is religious diversity in India and social harmony. Like a shrewd speaker, I decided to add a subtitle after the announcement made. The subtitle is Problems and Solutions. So, you know the problems. I'm going to try and talk about the solutions. I have some very drastic solutions up my sleeve, because I have thought over the problems for a long time. Like you, I live the problems as well, even though at the other end of the world. But as the world has now globalized, people don't think that they are living very distant from each other. And in the last 10 years, technology has created an environment where the distance has virtually disappeared. So if somebody burns the Holy Quran in North America, then I have to run and watch if somebody is not burning my car in Delhi, because this happens all the time. Anything that happens in one part of the globe today has an immediate impact. So although we may be talking about the religious diversity in India and social harmony, the problem of maintaining social harmony, these problems not only have an impact on the United States of America, but on the rest of the world. America plus Europe plus the African world, and today even the South American world, because the issues have all converged to certain very specific problems. When we talk of diversity today, we have those things. But in the case of India, there are also certain specifics. India, number one, is a civilization which goes back to a recorded history of at least, even if you are as niggardly as Wendy Doniger or Michael Witzel, then it is at least 5,000 years. If you look at some modern archaeological evidences that goes up to 8,000 or 10,000 years of record. But there is a continuum. And there is a history. There is also the painful fact that much of that history is a forgotten history. Because the discourse which has pervaded in the last 150 years And largely the discourse through the English language has taken over, and it looks as if that is the real history. So, you know, the history which you find today written in books in English, Indian history, is the history which is taught in schools, it is taught in colleges, it is taught in universities, and that is what the IAS officers who govern the country know. That is the history that the politicians know through their local languages. If they have studied English, of course there are great scholars of English like Dr. Karan Singh and some others. But those who don't have the facility, they have studied it through the Indian modern languages. But it is basically that history written in 150 years. I cultivated a different route. In my first year of college, although I was a student of English honors, after 6 months of physics honors, which I disliked and changed over, I started reading the language called Sanskrit. I could read medieval Hindi, modern Hindi, later on Gujarati, and then other European languages, etc. So, I have read my history first-hand, ancient history, through the text. Tomorrow in town there is another lecture by a very famous archaeologist. I don't know if you know about it. Hopefully that lecture will happen by Professor Nagaswamy. He is the Director General of Archaeology, Tamil Nadu. And he's going to give a wonderful lecture tomorrow. So, those who have seen history as it is, they have a very different perspective. And for them there is no controversy. Because controversy about history, about culture exists in books of propaganda, books of education. They don't exist for somebody who has direct access to the text. For the large number of Indians, whatever access to the text is there, it is there. Millions of Hindus in India, they listen to Ramayana and Mahabharata as it is narrated to them by the Kathakars and the Vyasas in different languages all over India. And these Kathakars and Vyasas, they quote from the text, sitting right there. It is the controversy that comes in the ruling classes, in the classes that have to govern, in the classes that have to take certain political positions. They have to do a spin on it. So, my first submission is, as far as possible, if you can read the original, well and good. If you can't, then read a good translation and discover things for yourself. This is what I advise my students. I'm not presuming that you are my students, but then there is only one way for any learner. That is to try and find out what is there in things themselves. And once you do that, then you develop a very clear perspective. For instance, you see, the system that we inherit is based upon an educational system. We all know that it was made by the British Macaulay onwards for government jobs. Now, that is old story, very old story now, because in 1946 India became independent, and in 1950 it had an independent constitution. But what it also had was a new political milieu. And the political milieu that it came to have was the milieu of not Mahatma Gandhi, but of Jawaharlal Nehru. Now, you see, here is a very big event that took place. Gandhi's vision for India was very different from Nehru's vision for India. For whatever reasons into which I am not going to go today. In spite of the fact that the Indian National Congress chose Sardar Patel to be the Prime Minister, Gandhi himself said, make Nehru the Prime Minister. And then Nehru comes and he does exactly the opposite in each and every respect from Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi said that the villages are going to be the focus of development. Nehru's model was the socialist, Soviet Socialist Republic, the cities. It was the Fabian model. And the Fabian socialist model that India adopted. Now, this model, although it did not inherit the capitalist model of United States, it was essentially a model based upon a godless way of life. It was a communist model. And like contemporary consumerism that pervades the whole world, the fundamental value was to be secular. Now, Nehru was not at all happy with religion. Apart from the fact that religion had caused, or so people thought, that religion was the cause of partition of the country, and indeed it was, there is no doubt about it. So, modern India did not want to be a theocratic state. It was not a theocratic state. And Pakistan became a theocratic state, and now we know what it has become. But the Indian state, under Nehru's guidance, came to be a socialist state which was a marked difference from what had happened in the last 5,000 years. Nehru starts with a non-religious state, if not an anti-religious state. And as Dr. Karan Singh said about a few months ago in a very important lecture, and remember, Karan Singh is a congressman, he said, who is secular in India? Either he is a Hindu, or he is a Christian, or he is a Muslim. It's only a few people, the Communist Party people, who are secular. And I have known the Communist Party's people for the last 35 years as, my college mates and then as party people. They all go and see horoscopes. So, that communism is also not very deep. It's not that kind of communism. India then developed a system where it got cut off from its heritage, and a jargon of secularism came to be developed, where everything that was concerned with heritage was put aside. Now that was the first error, because when the total public is practicing religion of one kind or another, then how are you going to reconcile their different demands and their demand for a legitimate citizen believing in a faith? Now, please understand. It is understandable that the state does not have a religion. And in this respect, it is a non-theocratic state. But just as a state has responsibilities for its citizens, for health, for clothing, for human rights, for education, it also has the responsibility of giving them the facility to practice their belief in a viable manner. If you just say, yes, yes, you can practice your belief. We'll give you one holiday on Diwali, one on Eid, but the road going to Prayag shall not be repaired. The road which is in front of graveyards, Christians and Muslims, will not be taken care of because we are not worried about religion. Religion is not going to be the content of education because this is a secular state. No child will know what is religion. No Hindu boy will know what is Hindu belief because it's not part of education at any level, primary level, middle level, secondary level, college level, PhD level. He would also know what is the belief of a Christian or a Muslim. He would also not know what are the different kinds of religious belief. So, the kind of secularism which came to be practiced under Nehru's guidance was a kind of secularism which was totally negative. On paper it was Sarv Dharma Sambhav, that there shall be an equal respect for religion. Now I can respect you only if I recognize you. If I don't even recognize you, then how can I respect you? See, if I don't know you at all, why you believe in this way, then how can I respect you? So, how can an educated Indian respect, number one, members of his own faith and members of another faith? You know, in this book I have an extensive essay on that. It was a paper that I read at Muddle College, Oxford. This is the crux of religious strife and social disharmony in India. That religious education, or, now remember, religious education does not mean how to go to a temple. Because that you can learn by seeing how others are going to a temple, or how they are going to a mosque, or how they are going to the church. That external part of the ritual can always be taken care of by the force of habit. But that force of habit is not the content, the serious content of any religion. I'm sure there is no dispute about that. My just going into a place of worship and coming out, whether in 10 minutes or 1 hour, it makes no difference. You know what I see today? I'm driving on the road and all of a sudden I have to stop. Why? Because the car in front of me has also stopped and he's, doing a little puja for 30 seconds to the roadside temple and then he goes on. You see this all the time. In other words, this is the state of religious education that we have in India today. And this applies across the board. It applies to Muslims, to Christians, to the very, very few Parsis that are there. And of course to the majority, 80%, now 75% Hindus in India. I gave you the Hindu example. The Islamic examples are just too many. That if on Friday they have to have a prayer, and if the road is to be blocked, then it will be blocked. So, innumerable examples, and then if you have this level of religious education, then what happens is that you fall prey to sloganeering by politicians. Now, this is the crux of Indian disharmony. And this is a result of a very distorted jargon of secularism, which has been fought. I don't want to go into the debate whether the Indian state should be secular or not. That's beyond debate. We have decided that the state shall not have a religion. There is no dispute at all about that. But if the state takes care of my health, if I as a citizen, tax-paying or not tax-paying, can say that, look, I need health care, please provide. I need education for my children. I need assistance for that. I need protection. I need that the borders are guarded by the military. And if you need to spend a few millions on it, then you do it. And that you raise an army. If I can demand all that, then why can I not demand that there should be education in the field of religion? Now this was the greatest error of Nehruvian era, which India is still not admitting. You talk to any senior IAS officer, you talk to an education minister, they will not admit. Now comes the second point, which makes it much worse. The Indian Constitution, I forget the article, I think it's 26 or something like that. It gives the right to the so-called minorities to hold their own institution and teach their culture and religion and language. Now, first of all, the word minority is not qualified at all in the Indian Constitution. The Supreme Court to this day has not given a clear analysis of what is a minority. Who is a minority? Who can be a minority? Who cannot be a minority? Is that minority going to be decided only by numerical strength? So in other words, till such time Muslims are 49.9%, will remain a minority. It's absurd. It's absurd even today. They are 25% of the population. And then they are also a minority, and the Sikhs are also a minority, who are perhaps not even 2% of the Indian population. So if a minority commission is made in India, then they'll see to it that all minorities are there. So those who are 25% of the population are also minority, namely Muslims. The Sikhs are 2%, and the Jains, who are now the newly made minority, at least in the state of Delhi, are also represented by 0.05%, and they will also have one member. Now, do you understand the problems this creates for governance, for administration, and the lopsidedness this creates? And then you go from here to the next step. My question. I'm just asking you questions. And you know the answer yourself, because the answer to absurdity is only one: total rejection. What is the logic of giving special status to a minority, whether it is 25% or 2%, to manage their institution for religious and linguistic growth? Is religion something which is related to numbers? If there are 5 people, they need religion as much as 5,000 people do. Moral conduct, spiritual quest has nothing to do with numbers. It has only to do with quality. This question was never asked when the Constitution of India was made. This question has not been asked very clearly, bluntly, repeatedly to this day. Why? Because when the Constitution was written, there were people like Ambedkar who had their education at Columbia University, where they had professors who were working under a colonial anthropology model. Now you know what is the colonial anthropology. Colonial anthropology is the anthropology of the white man who started venturing into the non-white world from 15th century onwards. So they look upon the colored people, their customs, their ideas, and they define them so that they can govern them. So when they come to India, they establish laws where they divide people only according to religious lines. So they make a Hindu Marriage Act, they make a Muslim Marriage Act, they make in 1920, which Mahatma Gandhi strongly opposed under those Minto-Morley reforms, that there will be reservation areas based on religion from where you can vote. And Gandhi said, no, this is not possible. I don't want the country to be divided. Gandhi said the same thing in 1930 in the second Round Table Conference in London. That no, I don't want the Hindu community to be divided into touchables and untouchables, because I want the reform of the whole community. So, the anthropology which was brought onto India was that of dividing the people and further dividing. Do you know what has happened day before yesterday? In Haryana, the Jats will get 10% reservation. Now, if you know that in the street of Haryana, if there is a fight, it's most probably a Jat who has beaten up a non-Jat. This is the reality. किसी दिन भी चले जाइए, पिट कर आ जाइए, अमेरिका से जाइए गुड़गांव, पिट के आ जाइए, जाट ही बाप को पीटेगा. And now it is the Jats who have got 10% reservation. So the colonial model was taken. Society was divided accordingly. Look, India was, in the true spirit, a secular state before it came to be defined by colonial anthropology. There is enough literary evidence to substantiate that one God is looked upon in different ways by different people. Our texts are full of it, and I'm sure you know, I need not quote them, you know. Ekam Sadvipra Bhavda Vadanti, the 10th mandala of Rig Veda, and then Sarvam Idam Khanu Brahma, different Upanishads, medieval period, 11th century text, 12th century text. There are so many which go on to, without any doubt, prove. And the Indian state, mind you, did not have a religion. The Indian monarch, like Ashok, the Indian monarch, like Harshavardhan, the Indian monarch, like Chandragupta Maurya or Samudragupta, would have a personal dedication towards a sampradaya, be it Shaiva or Vaishnava, and he would certainly favor those people in the sense that he would give them more money and patronage. And by modern standards, maybe there was a little warp. But there was no question. Namaskar, sir. Most welcome. I am highly gratified that Professor Nagaswamy. Aye, sir. Aage, please. It's a great honor. Let us give him a hand. Professor Nagaswamy is not keeping very good health. In view of that, it is indeed his very, very great benevolent feeling that has brought him here. And we are all very grateful to him, sir. We are all very grateful to you. So to continue what I was saying, that the classical Indian state already practiced the secularism which the Nehruvian state failed to practice, and the Indian state is failing to practice and create the social harmony that it is only talking about. Because the Rajadharma was a dharma of governance. It was not a governance of personal faith. The king may be a Shaiva, but then the state was not run according to the Sampradaya lines. As a matter of fact, there are no such lines defined. You know, many people ask me, why can't the Sikhs have a personal law? They are making great efforts in Delhi that a Sikh code bill is brought in. This is the latest, sir, while you are gone from homeland. They are going to introduce in the Lok Sabha a new bill, just as the Hindu Marriage Act exists and the Muslim Marriage Act, a Sikh Marriage Act. And of course, all the Khalistanis, well entrenched in Canada and elsewhere, they are egging on the Indian politician to do this as part of patronizing the Sikh community. When we had these discussions, I asked, and many people usually say, why did the Supreme Court in its wisdom put the Sikhs and the Jains under the Hindu Code bill? Now I have a very simple question, and maybe Professor Nagaswamy will correct me if I am wrong. Is there a Dharma Shastra specially made for Buddhists? There is Manav Shastra. It is for everybody. Manu, Apastam, all these Griha Sutras, dozens of them. But when Buddha made a separate system of worship or of Matantara or of philosophical concept, when he said, I will not follow the path of Jnana, when he gave all that Sangha, Dhammam Sharanam Gacchami and Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, did he also give a Dharma Shastra separate? Did he also give an Achar, Vichar totally different? Did he say that don't follow the Varnashram Dharma? And so the Supreme Court, when it said that the Jains and the Buddhists and the Sikhs are to be covered under the Hindu Code Bill, it was only following the ancient tradition. And now the ancient tradition is being broken. And who are the people who are encouraging them to break it? I don't want to go into that, but we all know, we have sufficient evidence. It comes a lot from University of Chicago and Columbia, those great scholars there. It is a fact that this colonial anthropology is the prime cause of social disharmony in India today. Now to go ahead with this whole business, society is being broken after this majority and minority divide. And as I said, I've never been able to understand why is religion bad for majority and good for minority, so that the minority can have their institutions and run it. Why is it not possible that different faiths openly, philosophically are part of education system from primary to the university? If that cannot happen, then we go as part of the anthropology into a division along caste lines. And we have been making those divisions again and again and again. Then we have also made some very spurious divisions along so-called racial lines which don't exist in India at all, the Aryan and the Dravidian divide. We were talking day before yesterday over some new research which Professor Nagaswamy is doing regarding a crucial text to show that this whole divide is a fabricated one. I don't want to go into that because that would make the subject a little different. But it is again and again that social disharmony in India is disturbed along these lines. So, what do we do? What are the solutions? What are the solutions that I can talk about? I think it is time now that on grounds of rationality, as far as the personal code bills are concerned, we go back and start talking about what was laid in the Constitution, a common civil code. The Supreme Court of India has been reminding the government of India time and again to do something about it and to bring in the common civil code. I fail to understand that if there can be a common civil code in United States of America, in Australia, in Canada, three major places in the world to which the so-called South Asians want to migrate constantly, then why can't these South Asians who want to migrate from India and Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, and why can't those South Asians like yourself who have already migrated cannot raise their voice in favor of the common civil code? You cannot ask for a diverse civil code in the United States, can you? Or in Canada. Now in Canada, in the immigration, and I've seen this while interviewing, they ask you the first thing, especially to people who are likely to ask for a special code, that what is your belief on this before granting visa. This is happening. And in Australia. It is only in India. And in India it is being increased. So unless people in the country and people outside the country, and as I said right at the outset of my talk, that today the inside and the outside, the barricade has broken with information technology, with new environment. Unless this is brought in, social harmony will go on eluding us. Because the classical values of the Indian tradition, if they believe in equality of not just all human beings, but of all jiva. You see, if you accept Vedanta as one of the major philosophical systems of India, around which there have been so many other sub-systems for these thousands of years, and if you accept the idea of Sarvamidam Khalu Brahma, then why can you not accept that in modern times there has to be a code of conduct which must be free of the earlier baggages of historical period? In the Indian tradition, there is always the provision that the moral code changes with time and place. You know, the Smriti has to undergo change. All the Smritis, they have layers of changes. We know that by reading the text. And we have the principle also. So, if instead of the colonial principle of describing people in ethnic terms, I'll tell you a small joke. About 10 years ago, I went to University of Hawaii and I went to their museum. The lady, the curator, showed me it was a great museum of musical instruments. And she said, this is ethnic Chinese, this is ethnic Indian, this is ethnic African. She showed me the whole. At the end she said, well, don't you think we have a wonderful ethnic museum? I said, yes. I said, but madam, there is one ethnic which is missing. She said, oh really? There is nothing missing. I said, yes, there is missing. Where is the white ethnic? Why don't you have a white man's violin sitting here? Because from my point of view, you are ethnic. Just as you look upon me as a brown man and call me ethnic, I look upon you as a white lady and call you ethnic. So to make it completely ethnic, in this museum you should have the instruments of the musical instruments of the white cultures also. She simply did not like it. And I thought that it was my duty to write it in the visitor's book because maybe somebody else 10 years later may like it. Now this is the crux of the problem. Social harmony is eluding India because India has given up some of its most profoundest understandings and practices which were pre-colonial. You see, in the Islamic period, the divide was very clear. The ruler is the king, and the non-Islamic subject is the dhimmi. Right?